Welcome to the Multifamily Investor Nation podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins-Hutton, Director of Investor Education here at PassiveInvesting.com. And I am excited to be joined again today, Christopher Stout. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yes. Well, before we dive into Eagle Apartments, 16 units in Fayetteville, Arkansas, one of my favorite areas, Northwest Arkansas, tell us a little bit
You're
about
from there,
yourself.
right?
What was that?
I think you're from there, right?
No, we used to own property there. We actually
Okay.
recently
I'm
sold
sorry.
it.
I thought you were from there.
Yeah, no, but I'm a Texas girl.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about you and your property. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into the multifamily space.
So I started out buying two-family homes in New York with my own money, saving up, and the number was always $100,000. So saving up 100,000, buying a two-family, saving up 100, buying a two-family. Did that for many years, until I was exposed to the multifamily space, something that I thought would never be possible to continue to acquire stuff, the size that we're acquiring it. Yeah, and continue to grow from there. Use my past track record to show confidence with investors, and once we got up and going, it's been pretty smooth sailing since.
Well, awesome. Well, let's dive in. Eagle Apartments, 16 units, Fayetteville, Arkansas. When did you close on the property and what was the purchase price?
So we closed in July of 2024, and the purchase price was 1,263, 1.2, just over 1.26.
That's
1,264. 1,264 million.
All right.
I don't know how we got to that number, but
well, okay. So let's first dive in. How did you hear about this property? Was it on market, off market, or were you working through a broker? Tell us a little bit about how you found the property.
So all of our recent acquisitions in Northwest Arkansas have been direct to seller. So it's been endless amounts of pounding the phones, looking for people that have owned the property. There's a big theory in the market that there's a lot of people in trouble with larger multifamily now, which is probably the truth. So we were looking down that road for a long time, probably almost all of 2023 and some of 2024. And what's actually proven to be better for us is going after owners who have owned stuff. We put in a filter of over 5 years, but it seems like the owners that we're meeting owned this stuff for at least 10 years. And we're able to acquire the property from them. And I think what makes it a little bit easier to buy properties from owners like that is, they've owned it for 10 years. So no matter what, they're making, I would say, good money. They're making money on their property. So, they're not in a position where they're losing. They're not in a position where they're in trouble. There's no stress behind the sale. It's simply just, sure, we'll sell the property. And there has been a pretty rapid increase in value in the area. There's been a rapid increase in value in real estate as a whole over the past few years, but there's definitely been a rapid increase in value in the specific area that there's the properties that we're acquiring, there's still more upside to be had. And it's just all this stuff. So we bought 56 units, which we actually spoke to you on one of the previous shows. And again, all smaller transactions than we'd like to be involved with, but we're finding better luck, with these smaller deals, and we're able to pick up a couple $1 million worth of profit almost every one.
Well, all right. Okay, so you're calling direct to seller. So this deal closed in July. When did you get in connection with the seller? And were you able to get a contract immediately, or did you have to, form a relationship over time with the seller?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I love to talk about that because, people who attempt to do the direct to seller route will call numbers, and by the way, we've found the most amount of success in the wrong number. And probably some people don't know what I'm saying when I say it, but I say all the money's in bad phone numbers. What I mean by that is if you type in 123 Main Street and Joe Smith comes up as the owner, you call the phone number that's listed, bad number or disconnected or whatever. People will then go to 124 Main Street, right? They'll keep going down the block. But we found a lot of luck in when a phone number is bad, stop and continue to try to get in touch with that person, whether it be try another website. Haven't spent much time or effort on mailers. Just continuing to kind of hunt the person down. And, it's 2024, so there's a million different ways to get in touch with people. LinkedIn, Facebook, any different way. Spend the time on the wrong numbers. And then number two is no one ever says yes right away. Um, it's always relationship over time, texting, staying up with like text like, hey, how's it going? Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, that kind of thing. And just keep it, and eventually with the right conversation, people seem to be more inclined to stick with someone who's been following up with them for a long time.
So when did you actually make your first connection with the seller?
Probably 4 months earlier.
Okay.
That was probably a long explanation that I didn't get right to the question. I feel like a politician at the moment.
Well, but you gave us a lot of insight on how
Yeah.
you do it. So, let's just, make sure that we call that out too before you call yourself a politician. Um,
Answer the damn question, will you?
oh, I've got a story about that. I'll tell you after the show. My daughter had to watch the debate for her
Yeah.
homework. And it was quite comical.
Yeah.
Um, Anyways, so let's talk about how you got to the offer on this. So you reach out to the owner, you put a lot of energy and effort, you find the owner, you're forming the relationship. How did you get to the offer?
How did we get to the offer? Well, he knew why we were contacting him. And we actually, this is a guy who owns numerous properties in the market. So he knew why we were contacting him. How did we get to the offer? So we always try to get the seller to say a number first. And sometimes we get, and you hear this all the time in the real estate market, like, what's your offer? I don't want to send you any financials until we hear an offer. We'll throw out a higher offer than we think we'll be able to pay just to kind of get them interested. It's really like, it's like a hook in a marketing, any marketing hook. We sent out an email the other day, and I actually got this from a billboard that I saw in Florida. It was, your wife is hot. Call our air conditioning company. And I was like, that is a great hook. So we used it as a hook on an email. And the point was we were teaching people what the point of the email was to teach people what hooks we use when we call people. So I said, your wife is hot and then when you got into the email body, it said, it's a picture of the billboard, which in Florida, I think it's spectacular. And then hooks that we use when we call people. And the two hooks I use all the time are, we have a burning 1031 that we have to spend, which is usually true in one fashion or another. Well, whether we're going to use a 1031 on that asset or not, is always to be determined. And the other one is, we're a bunch of New York investors who like to overpay for real estate. And then it kind of like breaks the ice, because when you're calling people, if you hit them with a low number or, your property, oh, we'd like to buy your property, but it's obviously in disrepair, the roof's damaged, like the typical almost like negotiation style that was taught to us by our parents, like, walk up to the car you want to buy and talk about all the scratches and dents that you have on it. That may not be, that's never the best path, because, everyone who owns anything and wants to sell it wants to make sure that they get their piece too, right? They're selling something. So we always make sure to let the person know of how in love we are with their property. And we're calling them because we love the location. We're okay with the problems that may come with it. And that always seems to be a big difference from my old day of calling someone and hitting all the problems right away. Because then in their head is like, oh, this guy's never going to buy it anyway. They're going to beat me up so low that it's not going to be interesting to sell it. So you love it. You're interested in it. The roof is great. Don't worry about it. Yes, we see the paint peeling. It's okay. We know it needs a parking lot. No problem. And then once you kind of break that ice, it seems like the negotiation goes a little bit smoother.
Well, okay, so tell us how you structured the contract.
Let's see. That one was a clear, just fee simple sale, and the lending, which is actually a great thing to talk to. It's a great thing for all your lenders. Sorry, all your listeners, is when you're looking for lending on smaller assets. If you're say you're say I'm in New Jersey and I use TD Bank locally or whoever I use locally, and then I have a deal that's coming along in Northwest Arkansas. Uh, in the past, I would call my TD guy and say, "Hey, this is what we got," and I could tell you that it is unreal the difference you get when you call a local bank for a local property. So banks in Northwest Arkansas, and we've done this in Northern Alabama as well. Uh, we call local banks to there, local smaller banks that no one's heard of other than the locals. You get significantly better terms, significantly better rates, better leverage, better everything. I mean, they've even offered us no prepayment penalty, like just the best terms ever. And they want to put their money in their own market. So look at the local banks. It's such a big, because if you can't get good terms on, we use debt, right? Like most people, we use debt. If you can't get good debt on a property, or you put bad debt on a property, bad debt could be the demise of the whole deal. So making sure that you get good debt on the property, and the source of a good debt a lot of times is local banks.
Well, I definitely want to get into the terms of the debt and the specifics there, but let's talk about the actual purchase sale agreement. So how did you structure your offer as far as like earnest money down, what was hard, due diligence periods, closing periods, any extensions?
Okay, so here, this seems to be very common in specifically Northwest Arkansas. Um, Everybody that we've purchased properties from up to $5 million purchases, every seller so far has looked at the contract that we sent and said, I'm no longer interested in selling. Because our contracts are heavily worded in our favor. And then it's usually up to the seller to, tone it back a little bit to make them comfortable, right? Every single seller, and it's just the lawyers that do it, right? I mean, I don't need all this crazy verbiage in there that protects us to the utmost account. We're okay. We're buying a real estate deal, and we understand there's some risk and all that. It's just the attorneys who they're doing their job. All the sellers have basically gone back to, we only want to use the Arkansas the standard Arkansas form contract. So Arkansas just put out by, I guess it's the Realtors Association or something. There's a standard form that we use. It's a commercial contract. Very simple. It's like 5 or 6 pages long. And it's basically, you're buying this property. There's a certain amount of due diligence, and you could get out if there's like an environmental concern or not a clean title. Like very little exit way, but enough. And it's usually good enough, and just specific performance. So yeah, you said you're going to sell it, you got to sell it. And that's basically how it's been. And we've continued to work like that. We just use the standard Arkansas contract, and it makes everyone very comfortable, which is what we're trying to do, right? There's always a couple different ways. There's a couple things going on in a sale. It's not always the purchase price. We want to be easy to work with. We want to be known as easy to work with. These towns are small, although they're growing extremely rapidly. And a lot of the people that we're buying from have numerous properties. So we don't want to be that pain in the butt buyer that, got his way on a contract that doesn't matter anyway. And it's like, that guy was terrible to work with. I'll never work with him again. And we've name dropped when we purchase other properties, like, oh, we bought property from this guy. And, like I said, it's a small town. The big real estate owners know the other big real estate owners. And in commercial real estate, we're very concerned about closing, right? So, if your listeners probably know that, when you're buying a property, the guy you're buying from, or the guy or gal you're buying from, they have a huge concern whether you're going to be able to close or not. So if you are able to provide references, almost like you're applying for a job, when you're buying a property, they could call that person and say, "Hey, you guys sold a property to Stout before. How was he? Did he, cause any trouble or all that?" Because really, you have as a buyer, you have the ability to lock that seller up for a certain period of time. And actually, to answer your question about hard money deposits, most of the time, no one's asking for them. No earnest money at all. Which, when we signed the contracts, I'm like, where's the earnest money? And
Very interesting.
yeah,
So,
like, there is none.
so what I'm taking away from this is that you allowed the seller to bring their contract, which was essentially the Realtor Commercial Real Estate Association, standard contract for Arkansas. You guys fill it in the blanks there. I'm not familiar with that contract. So is it typically like 30 days due diligence, 30 days for lending, 30 days for close, or is the time frame a little bit different? And then
Yeah,
no
so
earnest money. That's
no
interesting.
earnest money. So the only time on one of these simple, and I know the show likes to focus on, one deal, but we've done a bunch of them. And one guy we had to extend because we were doing a 1031, and it required the 1031. The deal we were exiting to buy, the new deal got delayed a little bit, so we had to ask the guy that we were buying from, like, "Hey, we need another like 7 or 8 days." And he was like, "Okay, no problem. Send me 50 grand and I'll give you another 7 or 8 days." So in that sense, we were like, "Okay, we'll wire you the money," because he wanted to make sure that he wasn't getting toyed with. But for the most part, we're selling, not to get onto another deal, but there's another deal that we're selling out of 24 townhouses. So we purchased 24 townhouses and we're selling each one individually. The real estate agent that we're working with, because we were like, "Where's the deposits from the buyers?" And they're like, "Oh, we don't do that here. There are no deposits. There's a contract and that's it." And I'm like, "Okay." I mean, no one's really played games yet. Like, sure, some people have dropped out after the home inspection, which, that's going to happen. If you have a deposit, that could happen anyway. It's like dropping out of a deal during due diligence. You get your deposit back, so it's kind of like fairy dust anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's a different state, different way of working, and yeah, I mean, that's the sub $5 million market there. Once you get into 10+ million-dollar deals, it's a little bit different of a game, because you're dealing with people who are basically, I guess, more sophisticated or more understand the way that the game is played. But when you're on a one-on-one relationship with people, no broker, that kind of thing, like someone just selling a deal. Because I guess another thing is, on those smaller deals, they're not really engaging an attorney. So,
That's a
like in
good
New York,
point.
what's that?
I said, that's a good point.
Yeah.
For efforts of time, I want to make sure that we have time to move through like due diligence and other things
Yeah.
related
Sorry,
to
I'm
the
running.
deal. No, you're good. You're good. But I think, and there's plenty of word of wisdom there as far as like, just to pull a couple things out. One, I love the idea of adding references, like, offering that up at the time that you're making your offer to the seller. If you can go direct to seller, that was a good, like, little nugget in the bucket. But also paying attention. Don't if it's easy to get a hold of the person, there's going to be competition. They're going to
Yeah.
get calls from multiple people. But if you can't get a hold of them, if it's not easy, and you're the one that puts the effort in, that could be, kind of a genius little tip there. But let's pivot to due diligence. Okay, so you get the property under contract. Okay, we're working kind of with this, standard Arkansas contract here. How did the physical due diligence go on the property? What were the surprises here?
Yeah. So let's see. So my lights are turning off. It's funny. I got motion lights in this room, and when you stop moving, the lights go off. So due diligence. The parking lot. So in Arkansas, they use concrete parking lots. They are a pain. They last a long time, but when they start to go, they go and they're expensive to change. So the parking lot definitely was beat up. We had a water problem, which I'm very confident with fixing water leaks and water issues in crawl spaces and basements and all that. I'm in love with water problems because other buyers, when they see water problems like in the basement or crawl space or water seepage of any kind, there's so many people like, you know what? We're not going to buy it. We're too scared. So I love going in and fixing that stuff because most of the time it's like the number one thing that causes water problems is um is is bad grading slash gutters are letting off in the wrong spot. Because all the roof water's got to go somewhere, and a lot of times just redirecting that someplace else fixes your problem, and that's actually happened here. So the crawl space was sopping wet, and I got there when I went to go look at it. I got there right after a rainstorm, and I walked in the crawl space, and I could see they were like timid about it. They were like, "Oh yeah, we do get some water in the crawl space." I looked at it, and I'm like, "Oh, I could fix this, no problem." So we did, and we put new gutters on it, and the problem's gone. Let's see what else. There was a sewer problem. Another thing that turns people off, the sewer kept backing up, and I followed the sewer line out. And this is just stuff. I mean, listen, we've had surprises on real estate deals, so I don't want to act like I catch everything. But just like the surprises, the sewer line, I was able to follow it out and notice that there was a monster tree in the way. I was like, there's roots in the sewer line. This is an easy fix. So sure enough, there was roots in the sewer line. It was like a $7,500 fix or something like that. And now no problems. And something else we could do on these properties is peel off individual units. It's a great that whole thing is a spectacular tactic at the moment, just because there is no residential inventory. You could peel off specific units and I think we lost you.
Hi.
Hey,
You know
I don't know
what?
where you lost me.
You were let's we'll since we're so far in, we'll go ahead and we'll keep recording and I'll see if they can stitch it together.
Okay.
So okay. So you were talking about the sewer line.
Okay. So another problem was the sewer line. The sewer line, they were having continuous backups into the first floor units. I followed the sewer line out of the back of the property, and we saw there was a monster tree, and I'm like, oh, there's roots in the sewer. So like $7,500 later, the sewer was fixed, and we were good to go. So I guess the three problems would have been water in the crawl space, crushed up parking lot, and sewer repair. Two out of the three were fixed. We're noticing that, because another mistake that I've made in the past of owning real estate is over improving. So we've over improved stuff and not gotten paid for it. So we're noticing that the parking lot having a bunch of cracks in it, not dangerous cracks like trip hazards, just, cosmetic cracks. Is the market is so strong, and that it goes all the way back to like location. If you're in, I don't know, Houston, for example, where tenants have endless options to live in apartments, that stuff will matter more. If you're in Northwest Arkansas, where they have absolutely no choice but to live in your unit because it's the only one available, you could deal with a couple cracks in the parking lot. No one's blinking an eye on it. So it goes all the way back to location, location, location.
What about the financial due diligence on the property? I know you have 16 units here. I mean, this is a heavy college market, a lot of industry in the area as well. Tell us how how the tenant base is and how the physical or the financial due diligence went on the property.
So when we do financial due diligence, we're looking mostly at expenses, not so much income in these markets. And the main reason is, sure, we'll verify the rents and that kind of thing. But as far, we're not overly concerned about if say they're leasing a unit and the unit's vacant or something like that. There's something messed up with the rent. Because first of all, if we want that to be true, we want there to be vacancy when they might be saying that there's not vacancy. And the reason is, if we know there's a vacant unit, we know we could go execute our business plan, do a little bit of repair, as long as we lay our eyes on every unit, and rented at market rate, which is usually the goal is to get everything to market rate. The bigger thing that we're looking at is expenses. And when we're looking at expenses, the taxes, there's nothing we could do about, right? Insurance, we're going to get a fresh insurance quote. Those are our two biggest expenses. We're looking at repairs. We want to see if there's any trends. Are they sending a plumber there every week? Are they sending an electrician there every week? Things like that. And for the most part, assets that we buy, we don't run into the trouble of that, because first of all, a lot of times when units are built in the 70s and earlier or later, if you're talking about the 70s and 60s, it would be the 70s and later, right? When you're buying units in the 70s and later, you have trouble like that. When you're buying newer units, so the 80s and better, the 80s and newer, a lot of problems go away. A lot. We're using copper wiring at that point. We're using copper plumbing, cast iron drains. A lot of problems seem to go away in the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s. We'll always build in a contingency for air conditioned units, which are bound to go. But the funny thing is, we just bought a unit. We just bought a building that was built in 2005, and we had a bunch of units go. So, you have the old units that will last for 40 years, and you have new ones that'll last for 6. And it is what it is. Just by putting our eyes on it and saying that's an old unit, that does not equate to we will have to replace it. A lot of times it could happen that the newer units are the one that goes in. The old ones just keep chugging along.
And I can identify that with that. Like, we have a heater in one of our properties that, I mean, is double past its lifetime, and it just keeps on going, just
Oh
keeps
yeah,
going.
yeah.
And then a
No,
couple
no
others
trip.
we've had to replace, like one boiler we had to replace. That sucked. Um,
Probably
well,
eats up twice the amount of electric as necessary, but she keeps going.
right. Um, well, let's talk about the financing on the deal, because you talked earlier about the financing can kind of make or break a deal right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
You talked about using local banks. Let's talk about the specific terms that bank was able to offer you, like as far as like the loan to value, overall rate on the loan, if it was recourse, prepayment penalties, lockout periods, stuff like that.
Yeah. So it was recourse debt. We're not in love with recourse debt, but just for size, so anyone who's listening understands, we bought this property for 1.2 million. We just got an offer a couple months later for over 2 million. Did I say that right? We bought it for 1.2, and we got an offer for over 2 million a couple months later. So if that makes you feel a little bit better about the recourse, which is what made us feel good about the recourse. So we got recourse debt. They gave us 80% LTC. So excuse me. Excuse me. They give us 80% LTC, which means, they let us bake in repair costs as well. So as long as we front the costs of the repair, they reimburse us for it. And obviously we have to start paying interest on it once reimbursed, but we do get reimbursed for it. And what was the third thing? So, percentage rate. I think we're just above we're about a 7% interest rate there, and it's 10 years, interest only for 5, with no prepayment penalty.
Is it fixed rate debt?
Fixed rate, yes. I've never
And
borrowed
what's
floating
your
rate in my life, actually. And I started in 2008, and I watched the fallout from 2008. I just had it in my brain that fixed rate was bad, because that's like exactly when I started. So when I got into commercial, none the wiser. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I was smart about it. Like, it just, when I was presented with 2 different loan quotes, I saw fixed rate. I just skipped it. Like, even when we've borrowed 9 or 10 million bucks, I would see, floating, and I would see fixed, and I would, or variable, I should say, not floating. That floating, I guess, is slang, right? Variable. I would just skip it, and I would go to the fixed, and that's what just we went with. And then, goes by a couple of years, and all of a sudden you look like you were smart. It was just like luck of the draw for me.
Mhm. Well, did you raise any capital on this deal?
So this deal, not to get too complicated, but this deal we did a reverse 1031 on. So we purchased it, we used our own money, and we were selling out of a previous deal which didn't sell yet, and we recapitalized ourselves once we sold out of the deal previous to that. So a reverse 1031 is an interesting thing, is especially if you have the money sitting in the bank and you could buy the new subject property. So you kind of just take a 1031 and you turn it backwards, and that's exactly what a reverse 1031 is. You buy the subject property, while you're still in the process of selling property.
And so do you still have to use an intermediary on the initial purchase?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're actually the people that buy it.
Oh, there you go. Genius idea.
Yeah. So for example, like, my main man, Ray Liebman in Staten Island, he's been my 1031 guy since the beginning. He's the ultimate 1031 guy. It goes in deed of him. So it's Ray Liebman in trust of, our entity, which in this case was Sequoia Holdings or something. So it's Ray Liebman in trust of, so he's actually like the deed holder in the interim. And then to satisfy the reverse 1031, they then switch, the deed gets switched after you sell the old property. So you give him the money and he goes and buys it. And that's anything past the depth of that would definitely be a phone call for him. But I know the surface level, and I know how to push the money around. But that's basically how it goes.
Well, that
And
is
you have
a
to have a lender that's okay with it. That's the hardest part,
oh, there you go. Well, I think
because
that's a
we're
big
guaranteeing it, but he's buying it. So you got to get it. The only people that will let that happen usually is a local bank.
gotcha.
There's less
Okay.
process in local banks than there is, I guess, not in a bad way, but for better or worse, there's less process. So there's more like, yeah, we can make that work.
Well, in wrapping up our conversation today, Chris, what did you find easy during this process that you thought would be a little bit more difficult? And then what did you find harder that you expected, quite honestly, to be easier?
Uh, Give me a second on this one. I like to think of a good one. What did I think? You know what? I want to give you a good answer, but I can tell you that, like, we took a little bit of a back road here. Like, we graduated to buying assets much bigger, and then we took a turn and we started buying smaller assets again. So these, buying these things are so run of the mill, and we could, like, if you have kids for long enough, you look at them and you're like, you're gonna get hurt, and then they get hurt. Like, you could just see it coming. It's the same thing. Like, it's like riding a bike. Like, when we buy these things, the smaller ones, I would not say there was any crazy surprises after we closed where we we're like, oh my God. like, sure, we replaced more floors than we would have liked. You know, that we took up some flooring, and it wound up being that there was rotted plywood below it from an old roof leak, which part of our business plan, which we did immediately, was change one of the roofs. You know, so things like that, you do it enough times, and it's almost like, oh yeah, of course there's rotted wood, like, of course, like, sure, you know, you get numb to it, and you're like, yeah, just let's fix it, and you just make sure that you're not getting robbed, and you communicate with pictures and photos. You have to, um, knowing the numbers in construction is so big, and I think that's where a lot of people get taken advantage of. You know, I was in construction my whole life, so like it's difficult to tell me a number and like you're getting something over on me. I
Mhm.
could tell when, I mean, because I remember when I was in construction, I could talk about this stuff all day, but when I was young in construction and I would go to a really big asset, the first thing in my head is the owner's got money. And I didn't know who the owner was, just whoever this magical creature is that owns this thing. And sometimes we get the same kind of treatment that we get a bill and we're like, this is three times what it's supposed to be. We didn't get we didn't buy this building because we weren't sure of what we were doing. We got to this point because we know what we're doing. But I guess they get some people. So just making sure what stuff costs is where you could really stop yourself from getting taken advantage of.
Mm. And then, quite honestly, that's where it helps to have somebody knowledgeable on your team, whether it's a partner or a property management, for sure. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us here today. If listeners want to learn more about you, how can they do so?
So our website is stoutcap.com, stoutcap.com. And my email is chris@stoutcap.com. You can email me, and my email is dinging all day long. So if you email me, it will pop up on my screen, hopefully not go to junk.
Well, Chris, again, thank you so much for your time here today. We look forward to hearing about your future deals.
Awesome. Thanks for having me again, Whitney.